So first thing we'll do is we'll talk about corpus or corpora. And I see I already have a stray parenthesis there. Let's get rid of that. And that's what we'll do first. Then second, we'll move into talking about formulaic language. And then we'll try out some corpus methods for like the last, kind of break it up into 3 chunks. Maybe take a break or 2 or something like that. But our main goal is to take it easy. Oh, question number 1, I would like you guys to work together and then the 3 of you guys to discuss together, is what is a corpus? Using only your brains, don't use your phone, don't ask Gemini or ChatGPT, or don't Google it. Just using only your brains and imaginations. Come up with a 1-sentence definition of corpus for me. If you had to explain what is a corpus. If you don't know what a corpus is, that's fine. Just make it up. Make up something. Just use your brain and imagination for about a minute. Please discuss together, you two.
So in my mind, corpus is like the collecting of different words, saying of the meaning or of the categories and collect it together.
Yeah, something like so. A collection of text from a specific category. I guess a more specific way to word that is probably a collection of text that's been selected for a certain reason and within certain parameters.
Oh, let's start with Roy and Lawrence. Roy and Lawrence, what do you guys, how would you define what is a corpus in a sentence? Maximum 2.
I think it's large data set about the frequency of the
Okay, that's good. So using a large data set about frequency or vocabulary, stuff like that. Yeah, that's in the ballpark. That's very good. Excellent, excellent. And then over here, your group, let's have Ruby. How about Ruby? Ruby, you please be the spokesperson. What does your group say?
Corpus is the collected a lot of text.
Very good. Collected a large number of texts, right? Very good, that's good. So we got a large number of texts. A large number of texts. Question, Ruby. How large is large? How big is big? How big does it have to be? Is 10 enough? Is 20 enough? Is 100 enough? Is 1,000,000 enough? Is bigger better? Bigger's better. And then those texts, how long are the texts? Are they 100 words? Are they 200 words? Are they 6,000 words? Are they 30,000 words?
Depends on what text you collect.
Yeah, it depends on what, yeah. And then how do you decide which text you collect?
Maybe research on their research question.
Very good, yeah. Think about your research question. Yeah, that's really good. So you got your research question, right? And then what are you trying to answer with your research question? And then you got to think, okay, which corpus can I use? Or which corpus can I create, compile, construct, collect to answer my research questions, right? Very good. That's good. That's good. And it's very important, right? When you choose a corpus or when you create a corpus, because you can do really nice analyses. But if the corpus that you're analyzing doesn't properly address your question, then all the fancy statistics don't really matter because your data doesn't represent what you're trying to study in the first place. Okay, so that's very important. Good. Yeah. So, there's a few famous corpus linguists, about 3 or 4. And then one common definition of a corpus is this: a principled collection of naturally occurring texts. Okay? So important words there are principled, naturally occurring texts. Okay? A principled collection of naturally occurring texts. And then as Ruby, as you said, right, if you have your research question and then you want to use a corpus to address that specific research question, that's where principled comes in, right? What are you trying to represent? Are you trying to represent news articles across the USA? Are you trying to represent news articles across France, right? And then if that's what you're doing, then you might pick some major news outlets in France, choose a time frame, randomly sample within that time frame, and that would be your principled collection of news articles that aims to represent news reporting in France in some time frame. Okay, so then you have a principled collection of texts that are naturally occurring, right? And it aims to represent something. Okay, so represent, principled, those are some key words in corpus linguistics. Principled, representative. Question number 2. What is formulaic language? Using only your brains, no Gemini, or Gemini, as they call it in Japan, no chat GPT, no Google searches. What is formulaic language? Same groups. But this
Kind of like regular and consistent, like follows certain rules. Yes. And is the same in different situations.
Okay, let's go with the group in the back. And how about Sally? What is formulaic language?
It's a language that has the same word and collect together, just like the English, like the Irish,
Idioms.
Indians.
Idioms, yeah.
Also.
Very good, very good, very good. Excellent, excellent. Idioms, that's a good one. That's definitely. And then what is, without using your phone, can anyone define idiom? What is an idiom? Define it for me. Explain it to me. What an idiom is. An idiom is one, it is formulaic language. It's one kind of formulaic language. There's a lot more than that, but it's a great example. Can anyone define idiom?
A self-contained metaphorical phrase that doesn't make sense out of context.
Yeah, that's right about there. Metaphor. What's a metaphor?
Using one thing to represent another thing in other. Well,
That's good. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. I would define idiom as very similar. I would probably say it's a phrase where the individual words, you can't guess the meaning of the phrase by the individual words. Right? When you put it together, the meaning is different. You can't derive it from the words, like kick the bucket, right? It's a good example of an idiom. Kick the bucket. The individual words means you kick a bucket, right? The literal meaning. But it means die, right? He kicked the bucket, right? It means he died, right? So the actual meaning cannot be derived from the individual words that make up the phrase. Okay, so if we're talking about formulaic language, such as idioms or other types of formulaic language, how might one measure formulaic language? And now, I just want you to come up with some answers on how someone might measure it. And then don't ask me, what do you mean by measure? use your imagination, guess what I mean by measure, think about it, and just come up with anything. How could you measure formulaic language?
Searching something on Google or whatever. Sometimes you want to search a phrase and you put quotation marks on it.
I got these two guys in my class, and they both got the same name. They're both named Harunobu. So I told them to pick a name because whenever I say Harunobu, they both look, right? So they call themselves Gary and Larry. And then every time I see you guys, I think about Gary and Larry. So I might accidentally call you Gary and Larry, but it's not intentional. So how might we measure it, Gary and Larry? Tenses? So you would use grammar rules to measure them. Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, grammar rules could definitely help to measure that. Excellent, excellent, very good, very good. Then the group back there, Mary, we haven't asked you yet.
Maybe we could search whole phrases if they're standard enough, normal enough. But you could also, if there's a way to search the words used before and after, right before and after a certain word. If there's a certain word that very often has like certain words before after it, that could be a sign that that's a formulaic phrase.
Yeah, it's very good, very good. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Both answers are absolutely right. Mary, what you're saying gets more into the realm of, well, I shouldn't say that. Everything gets into the realm of corpus linguistics when we study language. But there's a specific word, like you said, if you got like a target word, and then search words that happen before or after, that frequently happen before or after, there's a specific word for that. Do you know the word for that?
No.
Okay. We'll talk about that one. I have rather radical views on formulaic language. Probably. I often disagree with other professors on stuff. It's okay. So collocation is the word, what you were saying right there. So collocation is the occurrence of two or more words within a short span of each other in a text. Okay? So usually with collocation, they talk about if you have a word and then the collocate, the word that co-occurs, usually happens within 4 spaces before or after that word. Right? I mean, usually it's like 1 or 2 spaces, but that's the standard operationalization of collocation. It's within 4 words. Okay? Yeah, and that's by Sinclair. Sinclair, 1991. Sinclair is one of the big names in corpus linguistics. He passed away, kicked the bucket, as it were, but very famous man, really good author, good writer, very good thinker, very philosophical, and he was one of the first people to really bring corpus linguistics to the forefront of linguistic analysis. Okay, and yeah, so that's collocation. Collocation's big. So collocation, one way I like to think of collocation is sometimes if you hear a word, your brain will anticipate which words will come next, right? So if I say, hello, how are, your brain's predicting that I will say you, right, last, because that's a high frequency or a strong collocation with that phrase. Sometimes you might even mishear someone because what you predict the person will say based on collocation and what they actually say are different. And you might hear what you predict you're going to hear, but in reality they say something different. Okay, then another type of formulaic language, well, I'll tell you one thing. I think collocation, DCW, by the way, I think collocation underlies all formulaic language. But when you get into the idea of formulaic language, there's lots of different terms for formulaic language. But I think it all comes from collocation. I think, I'll just go crazy. I think everything we say all the time has some measure of collocation. Language and word choice is not random. Everything we say is embedded in patterns. It's just a question of how strong those patterns are. Okay, so formulaic sequence are word combinations that appear to be prefabricated, stored holistically, retrieved as a whole. All right, so we have set phrases like hello, how are you? That nobody actually says. Okay, then other types of formulaic language are lexical bundles, and these are measured by frequency thresholds. You take a chain of 3 or 4 words and you search them up in a corpus, and do they happen more than, for example, 10 times per million words? If they happen more than 10 times per 1 million word stretch, then that would be considered a lexical bundle. So some examples of lexical bundles are, on the other hand, right, you can imagine that in an academic article, on the other hand, comma, or it is likely that, and that's a high frequency sequence of 4 words, or a lexical bundle. And a lexical bundle can be a 3-word lexical bundle, a 4-word lexical bundle, a 5-word lexical bundle. After 5, it kind of starts to fall apart and you don't get many high frequency ones. So 4 is a typical length that people do research on. Then there's phrase frames, and these are basically lexical bundles with an internal variable slot. Okay, so some examples are the blank of the, in the blank of, it is blank that, right? Like it is likely that, it is possible that, it is probable that, right? So this sequence of words here is very frequent, but then this filler, the variable slot, can change, and there will be a couple words that fill that slot more frequently than others. On the blank hand, right? So Lawrence, on the blank hand, what do you think is the most frequent filler that will go there? On the other hand, right? On the other hand, that'll be the most frequent. What do you think is the second most frequent? Mary.
I actually don't know.
I
I
know.
don't come back with anything. It's my own language.
All right, right? It's crazy to say. Once I say it, you'll be like, oh yeah. On the one hand,
Oh, on the one, yeah.
well, okay, so good. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk today about corpora. We're going to analyze a corpus, and we're going to look mostly at phrase frames because they're kind of fun. And that's what we'll do today. Okay, so our goals are to gain a better understanding of how the methodological choice in corpus research can affect our inferences of data in learner corpus research studies. The corpus that we're going to use today is, we'll go back to the idea of the corpus. The corpus that we'll use is a learner corpus where we have 400 essays written by people who speak English as their first language. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're good writers, but that's the group speaking. And then we have 400 texts about the same topic written by people who speak Japanese as their first language. And then we'll compare those and how do they differ, right? So that's what we'll work on today. Okay, so that was our goals. What are our goals here? Yes. So then we'll search up some phrase frames in this corpus. We'll pull out some phrase frames that we want to investigate and compare. Do we think the L1 speakers of English use them more? Do we think the L1 speakers of Japanese use them more? And then we'll run a couple statistical tests to see the differences between the groups. We'll use a log likelihood test first. That's an easy one to do. It's very popular in corpus linguistics. Why? Because it's easy to do. And then we'll run a simple t-test, which is also easy to do, but it's less common in corpus linguistics because you can't just use a ready-made tool to do it. You have to organize the data and clean it up a little bit, push a bunch of buttons or stuff like that. Okay, so we'll do both of them, and we'll see if the method of analysis makes a difference in our inferences of the data. Okay, so if I run this one, I might think, oh, these guys use it more to the point of statistical significance. But if I run this one, I might think there's not a big difference between the two groups. Right? So based on the test, our inferences, our conclusions, might be different, or they might be the same. Obviously, they're going to be different a little bit, otherwise I wouldn't bother talking about it. Okay, so learner corpus research, that's what we're working on, where it is when you compare learner language to that of L1 speakers. Right? So if we have L1 speakers of Mandarin, we can how do people who grow up speaking Mandarin, how do they differ from people who learn it, starting out in university as a second language, like studying Mandarin as a second language. A lot of people in North America compare English with Spanish because Spanish is widely spoken in the USA. A lot of immigrants and kids who are born, they go to school in English but speak Spanish at home. How does that differ? A lot of things like that. And we can compare learner language of learners from different levels. So first we can do L1 speakers versus L2 speakers, or maybe we want to look at just L2 speakers and at different levels, like beginners learning English as a second language versus more advanced writers, right? So that's another way we can do learner corpus research. And then finally, we can compare target language output from L2 speakers with different L1s, okay? So does L1 have an influence on L2 English? Are the mistakes that an L1 Spanish speaker makes different from what an L1 Chinese speaker would make, or an L1 Vietnamese, or French, or Italian, or Arabic, any language, doesn't matter. So we'll look at analyzing English as a second language. English is probably the most widely studied foreign language in the world, right? But it doesn't mean we only have to study English. If people in the future want to do research on Chinese, Mandarin as a second language, on Spanish as a second language, and people learning German as a second language, that's all very welcome and very nice. And part of me, I feel like there's too much emphasis on English to the detriment of other languages sometimes. I would like to see more attention given to other languages as well. Okay, the corpus that we'll use today is the ICNAL corpus. This corpus was put together, compiled by Ishikawa, Professor Ishikawa Sensei at Kobe University. And he had students answer 2 prompts in argumentative essays. Prompt number 1 was university students should have a part-time job. And the students had to argue yes or no. I think university students should have a part-time job because, or I think they shouldn't because. And then the second prompt was smoking should be banned in restaurants. All right. And then people would argue yes or no about that. Okay. So he had, corpus looks like this, a small corpus. So on the English side, there's a collection of 400 essays, which total about 90,000 words. And the average essay length is 230 words, a little short paragraph. Okay, and then the L1 Japanese also have 400 essays. The average length of each essay was 225 words, and it's 89,000 words. Very similar word counts, very balanced corpora, subcorpora in this corpus. Okay, so that's what we'll use to analyze stuff. And it's important to remember the prompts when we start to look at lexical bundles, frequent phrase frames or lexical bundles. you'll start seeing, you know, the word part-time job will come up a lot, smoking in restaurant, because of those prompts. Okay, so let's see. It's 10 o'clock now. We'll come back, we'll pull out Aunt Conk now.